Hey guys, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in. Can you imagine me being that annoying? Oh my god. It's Fire Force Doggo again, and much like everything else in 2020, there's nothing you can do about it. Today's video comes courtesy of Constantine Podcast Emporium and Conflict Minerals, and I really want to give them a big thank you for sending over a review copy of the game. So, in the mid-1990s, video games were going through a bit of an evolution. The days of Atari and Nintendo's blocky 8-bit pioneers were gone. The 16-bit mainstays were on their way out to make way for new 32-bit systems, but the promise of video games had been proven out over early claims that they were just a passing fad. Games like Doom launched 1,000 imitators, Need for Speed began its rise as a racing titan, and Civilization and SimCity had cemented the importance of the 4X and city building genres. Into this stepped a new game that would crown an entirely new genre. Now, it's hard to write an impartial review of a remake of a game that I spent so many nights hunkered down in front of, a can of Jolt or Surge in hand, only being forced off at the point that my dad needed to sign on to the new internet service called AOL. At the time, CNC was, for lack of a less trite word, groundbreaking. Like the film Halloween, or the first time I saw boobs in a movie, it was new and refreshing. People had never seen anything quite like it, and we wanted more. Flash forward 25 years, and what was old is new again, and we get Command & Conquer Remastered. To that end, let me just go and say that Remastered is one of those lazy, overused buzzwords like procedurally generated, open world, or roguelike. It's annoying and it's a generally empty term, but in this case it's pretty apt. To give you an idea, the new version of Command & Conquer, which includes both the original CNC and Red Alert, along with all the expansion packs and console exclusive missions, comes in at 25 gigs, a number that would have made most Pentiums sweat and Bill Gates flee in terror in 1995. And that 25 gig has been well spent. The graphics have been redone to allow for 4K support, the music's been re-recorded, options have been added for both modern and classic controls, and now there's mod support too. Without further ado, let's take a look at Command & Conquer. I'm going to focus primarily on the first game just because that's the one I've spent the most time with, although I think the praise and criticisms that I'm going to talk about here apply just as much to that game as they do the original. Let's take a look at the graphics first. Like I said a second ago, they've been upgraded to allow for 4K support, but have been redone to look much better on modern screens regardless. A quick teaser on the intro screen and in the first mission show you how much things have changed. The graphics for everything are sharper, more well-defined, and just generally cleaner than the old version. Like most video games, the graphics of the original CNC looked amazing at the time, and how could they possibly get any better than that? Now, of course, the original graphics look a lot muddier on modern HD screens, and the update is well needed and well executed. The units look much more defined. For example, the APCs are no longer M113s, but now have bolted-on armor. Infantry are still a bit small, but you can tell at a glance what the difference between a GI and a Grenadier are, for example. There's always a zoom-in option now that always helps you figure things out too. All the icons for the building taskbars have been redone too, and they look great. Terrain is clearly depicted while still feeling true to the originals, and buildings, effects, and animations all feel the same, but somehow improved. Now that's not to say that everything's been improved necessarily. CNC was made in the heyday of full motion video, when 3D graphics just couldn't adequately convey things like human emotion and facial expressions to any degree of realism. The general quality of the motion captures show that even when the game was originally made, these live action scenes were not the main focus of the budget for the game. Given all this, the acting and script could best be described as well-intentioned, but not up there with, say, the voice acting of the Jackal in Far Cry 2 or other memorable performances. But that's not to say they're bad. For the day they were amazing, and they evoke both nostalgia and a sense of how far things have come. My one gripe is that the cutscenes, even with the upgrades, still feel muddy, though I think there's only so much they could clean up. Honestly though, if they were going to focus their efforts in this remake on updating game graphics or the cutscenes, I think they made a good decision on where they spent their time. Moving on to gameplay, if you've never played a CNC game before, it's going to feel extremely derivative of most modern RTS games. That's because it created the base building, rock, paper, scissors unit balance formula, which Westwood had dialed in pretty well right from the start, even back in 1995. Compared to modern games, there's not a ton of strategy involved beyond basic reconning of where the enemy is, creating a strength in numbers force that will beat what the enemy has, and building defenses that can protect against the same. Now that's not to say that there isn't room for different types of strategies. You can certainly do a technician rush or something like that, but the game in its rawest form is a actions per minute style of gameplay with correct unit management orders and properly threading the unit balance tightrope as its core. There is some element of variety with the branching missions, but for the most part it's going to be the same type of mission, just with ever increasing numbers of tools for you to use. Now that's not to say there's no mission variety though. In addition to simple seek and destroy missions, there's rescue missions, commando raids, and base rescue missions. And speaking of commando raids, I'd forgotten my absolute love of the commando unit itself, who's first introduced during some surprisingly complicated infiltration antics partway through the game. While fragile against infantry, this trash-talking 360 no-scope trooper's sniper rifle absolutely deletes infantry. It also undoubtedly filled in any inspirational gaps for a whole generation of early COD deathmatch dipshits that Doom might have missed. And after you've beat the main GDI and NOD campaign missions, there's always online and skirmish modes as well to help keep you playing. There's a bunch of extras too, but I haven't delved into those much yet. Given the age of the game, there are some shortfalls though. If the developers had added some simple new features, such as waypoints and improved pathing, I think it would help reduce some of the monotony that can set in with some of these missions. As it is, your units need constant orders to be properly employed, or even sometimes to respond to an attack. They will chase enemies around like a Keystone Cop instead of picking the most effective intercept point. There's no fog of war once you've discovered an area, which allows for much simpler planning than having to constantly recon to update your knowledge of an area, but it also takes away from some of the strategic element. One minor annoyance I have with this is the fact that certain units, like transport helos, can't move into and discover new terrain. While all this is in keeping with the original spirit and gameplay of the game, I don't think anything should have been so sacrosanct as to have not been improved. None of this ruins the game by any means, it's just one of those minor concessions to modernity that I think would have been well received. As far as controls are concerned, you can pick between various options for original or more modern controls, and more importantly for my degenerating brain and eyes, options for increasing or decreasing the game speed, scroll speed, and the like. Overall they work and the menus are clear and simple to navigate. While not totally about gameplay, I love the lore of this game. It's like a 1990s version of what people imagine Antifa and Democrats are like. The bad guys are this Cobra-esque hydra of media manipulation, economic exploitation of indigenous cultures by appealing to their distrust of the first world, and outright aggression. It's the classic wolf in sheep's clothing villain by way of RoboCop 2, all led by a bald George Soros who looks like he does a weekend cable access show on the secret art of ninjutsu. It harkens back to the days of casual X-File-like conspiracies which, unlike now, few people took too seriously. Rather than believing in some half-baked world cult led by a guy who looks like he believes in healing crystals, people in those days would be more likely to say, believe in a massive company allowing a remake of a game in order to cash in on nostalgia to polish its own absolute garbage image with gamers. But even that's unbelievable. One interesting thing about how the script unfolds is that everyone in the game seems kind of annoyed with you all the time, and is thus a bit of a dick. It's like you just messed up their half-calf soy latte with organic chai notes and you should suffer the blade for it as a result. But I guess it's kind of just an attempt to get people to feel like they're playing a potboiler novel.
Commander, was there confusion with that last directive?
Dude, fuck you. Music and sound are both good all around. The music's available in original, remastered, and bonus soundtrack flavors, and is a perfect throwback to the 1990s. It's a mix of instrumental movie-style scores, rock, and techno with old sci-fi samples thrown in, often all in the same song. Again, it's typical of the time period, but something that's so distinctly associated with the early to mid-90s that it's instantly recognizable. Moreover, the music is actually good and gives a whole different vibe from the fully licensed soundtracks that are more common today. There's also a full-throated jukebox option that lets you build a custom playlist of songs, mixing and matching from both the original CNC and Red Alert however you want. Sound effects, for the most part, are very good as well, and seem to be faithful to the original, although again, a little bit tweaked. The lady who did the original EVA voice apparently came back on this project and re-recorded her lines for improved quality, and the genre-defining trope of having your troops verbally respond when you give them an order with something like "building" or "I'm on my way" are all present and clear. If I had one gripe, is that the sound bites tend to be a little bit repetitive, and it would have been nice for them to include a few new lines for your troops to spit out. Just another small but respectable improvement to give the game a little bit more of a fresh feel. All in all, this has been a really pleasant flashback for me so far. It's a breath of simplicity in an age of bloated open-world walking simulators, overwrought twitch shooters, and half-assed nostalgic cash-ins. The game feels like the people involved legitimately cared about putting out a product that was a faithful update of the game that many of us grew up with. At $20, it's hardly breaking the bank, and there's no greedy DLC or microtransactions in sight. And that makes it feel all the more like something from the 1990s. I think there's some concessions that they could have made to more modern games to make the game a little bit less resource intensive in terms of unit management and unit orders, but overall, the way things are is faithful to the original. Well, that's it for this one. Be sure to do all the usual shit. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, support my Patreon, play some heavy metal records backwards, and tell your friends. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.